Jack it up.
Hey, Sassy Scoopers, welcome back. It's Alex here, and with me today I've got the amazing Casey.
Hey, everyone.
We're going to be taking a deep dive into some seriously big ideas.
Yes, some biggies for sure.
Imperialism, liberalism, and structuralism.
These are ideas that, are woven into the fabric of the world around us.
They might sound a little intimidating, right?
They can.
Like isms. But trust me.
Oh, yeah.
Once we kind of break them down, you'll be surprised how much they actually connect to everyday life. Think of it this way.
Okay.
These concepts are like different lenses for understanding how societies work,
Yes.
how they change, and sometimes how they clash.
Exactly.
So that's what we're going to be unpacking today.
Yeah.
What do these isms mean? Where do they come from?
Right.
And why do they matter to you?
You got it.
All right, let's jump right in. First up, imperialism.
Okay.
It's a word that gets thrown around a lot.
Right.
But what does it actually mean?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, imperialism is about one country extending its power and influence over other countries or territories, often through force.
Okay.
So think military conquest,
Got it.
economic control, even imposing one's culture or way of life on others.
So it's not just about planting your flag on new land. It's about having control.
Right.
Political, economic, cultural, like the whole package deal.
The whole shebang, exactly.
Right.
And this isn't just ancient history.
Okay.
This is a pattern that's repeated throughout history.
Well-
I mean, we see it in the Roman Empire, the Spanish conquistadors, the British Empire spanning the globe,
Yeah.
and even some argue in certain aspects of modern-day international relations.
Whoa. That's a lot to unpack.
A lot of layers there.
But before we get too deep into the historical weeds,
yeah.
let's shift gears a little bit to liberalism.
Okay, sounds good.
Now, this one's all about freedom.
Yeah. That's the core idea.
Okay.
Liberalism emphasizes individual rights, liberty, limited government, and the importance of free markets. So think free speech,
Okay.
right, to vote.
Got it.
And the idea that individuals should be able to pursue their own happiness
Yeah.
without unnecessary interference.
So it's all about power to the people
You got it.
and letting individuals make their own choices.
Exactly. And this philosophy, it really took root
Okay.
during the Enlightenment period in Europe with thinkers like John Locke
Yeah.
and Adam Smith
Right.
championing these ideas. They argued that individuals are rational beings,
Okay.
capable of making their own decisions,
Right.
and that society flourishes when individuals are free to pursue their own interests.
So that's a big shift from the old days of like
Huge shift.
kings and queens ruling with absolute power, huh?
Absolutely. Liberalism had a huge impact on the development
I love
of
it.
modern democracies
Yeah.
and the idea that governments should be accountable to the people they govern.
Okay, so we've got imperialism, which is all about one country dominating others, and we've got liberalism, which is all about
Right.
individual freedom and limited government.
Right.
And how does structuralism fit into all of this?
So structuralism's a bit different. It kind of takes a step back
Okay.
and looks at the underlying systems and structures that shape a country's development or lack thereof.
Okay.
It focuses on the bigger picture,
Right.
global forces, economic systems, power dynamics, rather than individual choices.
I was like zooming out and
That's
looking
right.
at the whole playing field
Yeah,
instead of just the individual players.
exactly. And structuralism argues
Right.
that these larger forces often create inequalities
Right.
and limit the choices available to individuals, even within systems that claim to promote freedom and equality.
So even if you have the right to vote or the freedom to start a business,
Right.
those freedoms might not mean much if the whole system is rigged against you.
That's the key insight of structuralism. It challenges us to look beyond individual actions and examine the underlying power structures that shape our world.
This is getting seriously thought-provoking, Sassy Scoopers.
It is.
We've got these three powerful ideas,
Right.
each with its own history, its own set of values, and its own way of looking at the world.
For sure.
And the interesting part
Right.
is how these ideas interact,
Yeah.
sometimes complementing each other, sometimes clashing head-on.
Head to head.
That's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
We'll delve a little deeper into the philosophical foundations
Right.
of these ideologies, look at some real-world examples,
Yeah.
and unpack the criticisms and debates surrounding them.
It's going to be good.
We'll even touch on how these ideas are relevant to our lives today.
I think that's important.
even in seemingly unrelated areas like pop culture and technology.
Oh, yeah. It's everywhere.
So stay tuned, Sassy Scoopers.
Buckle up.
You're watching Sassy Scoop TV. If you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to check out more of our videos for exciting content. And if you like this one, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and drop a comment below. We would love to hear from you.
This deep dive is about to get even more fascinating. Welcome back, Sassy Scoopers. We're diving deeper into this fascinating world of imperialism, liberalism, and structuralism. We've got the basics down now?
Yeah.
Let's get philosophical.
Yeah.
Time to put on our thinking caps here.
Let's do it.
Explore the underlying beliefs and values that shape these ideologies.
Yeah.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion,
Yeah.
revealing the core assumptions about human nature,
Right.
ethics, and the very purpose of society.
Big questions.
Okay, first up, imperialism. What's the philosophical core
Okay.
of this whole empire-building business? What makes someone think
Yeah.
it's okay to dominate another country or another culture?
Well, historically, imperialism often relied on a belief in hierarchy,
Okay.
a conviction that certain nations or groups
Right.
are inherently superior to others. And this sense of superiority could be based on race, religion, culture, or even technological advancement.
It's like this, we're the chosen ones.
Yeah.
Destined to rule mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And that somehow justifies imposing your will on others.
Exactly. And it often went hand in hand with a belief in social Darwinism.
Okay.
The idea that nations are in a constant struggle for survival,
Right.
and the strongest will inevitably dominate. It's a pretty harsh worldview.
Yeah, it's basically like survival of the fittest, but applied to global politics.
Exactly.
Which leads to some pretty messed up ethical justifications for things like
For sure.
conquest, exploitation, and even violence.
Unfortunately, yes. That belief in one's own superiority can blind people to the humanity
Yeah.
of those they consider inferior. It creates a dangerous sense of entitlement
Right.
and a disregard for the rights and well-being of others.
So philosophically speaking,
Yeah.
imperialism is built on some pretty shaky ethical foundations.
It is.
So let's move on to liberalism.
Huh.
How does this view human nature
Okay.
and the ideal society?
Well, liberalism takes a very different approach. It starts with the individual as the fundamental unit of society. And it sees humans as rational beings,
Okay.
capable of making their own choices
Mm-hmm.
and pursuing their own interests.
It's all about empowering the individual,
Yeah.
maximizing their freedom.
Right. And ethically, liberalism places a high value on individual rights,
Okay.
equality before the law,
Got it.
and the protection of individual liberties.
Mm-hmm.
So the ideal society from a liberal perspective is one where individuals are free to flourish,
Right.
pursue their own happiness,
Okay.
and participate in a democratic system of government.
Sounds pretty good on paper.
Yeah.
But doesn't that individual first approach sometimes clash with the need
Yeah, that's a good point.
for collective action or social responsibility?
For sure.
Like, what about the common good?
Well, that's the ongoing debate within liberalism itself.
Okay.
Classical liberals tend to emphasize limited government
Right.
and individual self-reliance,
Mm-hmm.
while modern liberals see a greater role for the state in ensuring social welfare and addressing inequalities.
So it's that constant balancing act
Yeah.
between individual freedom and the needs of society as a whole.
Right.
Always a tricky one to navigate.
Always.
Okay, now let's bring in structuralism.
Okay.
How does it differ from liberalism philosophically?
Well, while liberalism focuses on individual agency and choice,
Right.
structuralism takes a more systemic view.
Okay.
It argues that individual behavior is largely shaped by the larger structures and systems we operate within.
So things like economic systems,
Exactly.
social hierarchies, power dynamics, all these things kind of influence how we think and act,
Right.
even if we're not aware of it.
Precisely. And ethically, structuralism is very concerned with issues of power,
Oh.
inequality, and exploitation. It sees these as embedded within the structures of society
Right.
and perpetuated through various mechanisms, including imperialism.
So if liberalism is about maximizing individual freedom, structuralism is about understanding how those freedoms are often constrained
Yes.
by systems of power.
That's a good way to put it. And structuralists would argue
Okay.
that true freedom can only be achieved by challenging and transforming
Right.
these oppressive structures.
Okay, so we've got these three distinct philosophical frameworks.
Yes.
Each with its own set of assumptions and values and ethical implications. But the big question is,
Right.
are these just abstract ideas? Or do they actually have real-world impact?
That's the important part.
Let's get down to brass tacks here.
Let's do it.
Look at some concrete examples.
Absolutely. Let's start with a historical example.
Okay.
That highlights the clash between imperialism and liberalism.
Okay.
The colonization of India by the British Empire.
The good old British Empire.
Right.
Talk about a classic example of imperialism. How does this illustrate the tension between these two ideologies?
Well, on the one hand, the British justified their rule in India by claiming to bring progress, civilization, and modern governance.
Okay.
They argued that they were acting in the best interests of the Indian people, even though it was clearly about securing their own economic and political dominance.
So it's that classic white man's burden justification we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The idea that they were doing India a favor by colonizing them.
Exactly. But on the other hand, the very act of colonizing India contradicted core liberal values. I mean, the British denied Indians basic freedoms, suppressed their culture, and exploited their resources for their own gain.
It's a stark example of how imperialism, even when it's dressed up in the language of progress, can trample all over the principles of individual rights and self-determination.
And it also set the stage for the rise of Indian nationalism and the eventual independence movement, which drew heavily on liberal ideals of self-rule and democratic principles. It's a reminder that even in the face of imperial domination, the seeds of resistance and the yearning for freedom can take root.
It's a powerful example of how these ideological battles play out on the world stage with real-world consequences for millions of people.
Absolutely. And we can see echoes of these same tensions playing out in contemporary debates about globalization, foreign intervention, and economic inequality.
Okay, so we've got a historical example that highlights the clash between imperialism and liberalism. Now let's bring in structuralism.
Okay.
What's a real-world example that illustrates how structural forces shape global dynamics?
A prime example is the global trade system.
Okay.
On the surface, it might seem like a level playing field where countries can freely exchange goods and services. But if you look closer, you see a web of rules, agreements, and power imbalances that often benefit developed countries at the expense of developing ones.
So it's not just about individual countries making bad choices. It's about the way the whole system is structured.
Exactly. Structuralists would argue that things like trade agreements, intellectual property laws, and financial institutions are designed in ways that perpetuate existing inequalities and maintain the dominance of wealthy nations.
For example?
We'll take agricultural subsidies. Developed countries often provide massive subsidies to their farmers, which allows them to produce goods at artificially low prices. This floods the global market with cheap products, making it virtually impossible for farmers in developing countries to compete.
So even if a developing country has the potential
Yeah.
to produce amazing coffee or textiles or whatever it is, they're stuck in a system that undermines their ability to succeed.
Exactly. And this is just one example of how structural forces, often shaped by historical legacies of imperialism, continue to influence global economic patterns and perpetuate disparities between rich and poor nations.
This is blowing my mind, Casey. It's like we're seeing the Matrix.
Right.
All these hidden systems of power
that
influence our world in ways we don't even realize.
And once you start seeing them, it's hard to unsee them.
Okay, Sassy Scoopers, we've taken a deep dive into the philosophical and historical dimensions of these massive ideas. But we're not done yet.
Oh, no.
In part 3, we'll be tackling the criticisms of these ideologies, exploring their relevance in the 21st century, and even daring to speculate about the future.
Ooh, that's a fun one.
We'll also discuss how you can use these ideas
that's important
to understand the world around you and even make more informed decisions in your own life. So stay tuned, because things are about to get even more thought-provoking.
You're watching Sassy Scoop TV. Dive into our playlists on philosophy, true crime, book reviews, AI and technology, and wars and conflicts for more captivating content. If you're enjoying this video, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.
Welcome back, Sassy Scoopers. It's the final round of our deep dive into imperialism, liberalism, and structuralism. We've explored their histories, we've talked about their philosophies, we've even looked at some real-world examples.
It's been a journey.
Now let's get critical. No ideology is perfect.
Absolutely not.
So it's essential to examine their weaknesses, their limitations, and maybe even their potential blind spots.
Yeah, we're moving from understanding to evaluation now.
So let's start with the elephant in the room. Imperialism.
Okay.
I mean, the problems with this one seem pretty self-evident, right? Conquering and exploiting others.
Yeah.
Not exactly a recipe for ethical behavior.
Where to even begin? Imperialism is inherently based on domination, exploitation, the suppression of other cultures. It's a system built on violence, coercion, and often outright brutality. The historical record speaks for itself.
Yeah. I don't think we need to spend too much time defending imperialism. But what about liberalism? I mean, it's all about freedom and rights. So where do the criticisms come in?
Well, one major critique is that liberalism, with its focus on individual rights, can sometimes neglect the importance of community, solidarity, and the common good. It can lead to a very atomized view of society, where everyone is just looking out for themselves.
Right, the idea that everyone is just kind of out for themselves, pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and ignoring the needs of others.
That's one concern. Another is that liberalism, while advocating for equality in principle, can sometimes fail to address systemic inequalities in practice. It can create a kind of formal equality that masks deeper power imbalances.
So you might have equal rights on paper, but if you're starting from a disadvantaged position, due to historical injustices or economic disparities, those rights might not mean much.
Exactly. Think about things like racial discrimination or economic disparities. Liberalism, some argue, doesn't go far enough in dismantling these structural barriers.
Okay, I see that point.
Yeah.
Now, what about structuralism? I mean, it seems pretty solid, focusing on the big picture, challenging systems of power.
Right.
What are the critiques there?
One criticism is that structuralism can sometimes be overly deterministic.
Okay.
It can paint a picture where individuals are simply puppets of larger forces, with little agency or ability to affect change.
Right.
It risks downplaying human creativity, resilience, and the power of individual action to challenge the status quo.
So if you're stuck in a system that's designed to keep you down, is there any hope for breaking free?
That's the challenge structuralism has to grapple with. Another criticism is that it can be overly focused on economic structures, neglecting other dimensions of power, like culture, gender, or race.
Right. It's not just about who controls the money, it's about who controls the narrative.
Exactly.
Who sets the norms, who has the cultural influence.
Exactly. So while structuralism offers valuable insights, critics argue that it needs to broaden its lens to capture the full complexity of power dynamics.
So we've laid out some of the key criticism of each ideology. But are these ideologies still relevant in the 21st century?
Oh, I think they're more relevant than ever.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We see the legacies of imperialism playing out in global conflicts, neocolonial economic patterns, the ongoing struggle for decolonization. Liberalism remains a dominant force shaping political systems, economic policies, and individual aspirations. And structuralism offers a critical lens for understanding inequality, globalization, and the interconnectedness of our world.
So it's not about picking a winner or declaring one ideology as the ultimate truth.
Definitely not. It's about recognizing the strengths and weaknesses of each perspective, using them to analyze complex issues, and engaging in thoughtful, informed debate.
Exactly. Because let's be real sassy scoopers.
The world isn't black and white. It's not. It's messy. It's complicated. It is. And it's full of contradictions. Absolutely. And understanding these ideologies with all their nuances and complexities is essential for navigating that messy world, making informed choices, and contributing to a more just and equitable future. For sure. So where do we go from here? What's the future of these ideas?
That's the exciting part. We get to shape that future. It's up to each of us to critically examine these ideologies, challenge their assumptions, and adapt them to the challenges of our time.
Maybe the future isn't about clinging to one ideology, but about drawing from the best of each, while constantly questioning, evolving, and seeking new ways to understand our ever-changing world.
That's a great way to put it. It's about embracing the messiness, engaging in dialogue, and never stopping the process of learning, questioning, and seeking a better way forward.
Well said, Casey. And on that note, Sassy Scoopers, we've reached the end of our deep dive. But the conversation doesn't end here. We would love to hear your thoughts. Which ideology resonated with you the most? What are your biggest takeaways? Hit us up in the comments below. And before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay sassy